Fear is a powerful primal human emotion. It exists to protect us from danger. But this instinct can be twisted. It can be weaponized. Fear-mongering is this deliberate act of manipulation. It involves intentionally provoking public fear about a particular issue. This is not about genuine warnings or legitimate concerns. It is about control. Those who use it understand that a frightened populace is easier to sway. They know fear can cloud judgment and stifle dissent. This strategy is as old as power itself, a dark undercurrent in human affairs. The mechanics of fear-mongering are deceptively simple. They often begin by identifying an existing anxiety. This could be economic insecurity, social change, or threats to safety. The fearmonger then amplifies this anxiety. They create or exaggerate a perceived threat. Often, a scapegoat is introduced, an other to blame. This us versus them narrative is crucial. It simplifies complex issues into a battle of good versus evil. Critical thinking is discouraged. Emotional reaction is prized. People are pushed to react, not to reflect. Power, in its many forms, often relies on such tactics. Governments can use fear to justify repressive laws. Political campaigns might use it to discredit opponents or rally support. Corporations might use it to resist regulation. The goal is consistent, to maintain or expand control. By painting dissenters or reformers as dangerous, fear-mongering seeks to isolate them. It aims to make the status quo seem like the only safe option. This is a defense mechanism for entrenched interests, a way to fight change. When it comes to civil rights, fear-mongering finds fertile ground. Civil rights movements, by their very nature, challenge existing power structures. They demand a reordering of society. They call for an expansion of justice and equality. This inherently makes some people uncomfortable. Fear-mongers exploit this discomfort. They paint demands for rights as threats to stability, as attacks on tradition. They know that fear can be a potent weapon against the slow, hard march toward justice. It seeks to stop progress in its tracks by making people afraid of what that progress might bring. History provides stark lessons on fear-mongering's impact on civil rights. Consider the Jim Crow South in America. The entire system was built upon a foundation of fear. White society was fed a constant diet of fear. Fear of black economic competition, fear of black political power, fear of social mixing. This manufactured terror was used to justify brutal segregation. It upheld a system of profound inequality. The narrative was clear. Any change to this order would lead to chaos and destruction. This was a lie, but a powerful one. The tactics used were varied and vicious. Propaganda depicted black people as inherently inferior or dangerous. The Ku Klux Klan and similar groups used outright terror. Lynchings were public spectacles, designed to instill fear not just in the victim, but in the entire black community. False accusations of crimes, particularly against white women, were common. These served to reinforce the narrative of a dangerous other. The legal system itself was complicit. It enforced discriminatory laws born from and sustained by this climate of fear. The aim was total subjugation, achieved by making the cost of resistance terrifyingly high. The Red Scare is another potent example. In the mid-20th century, fear of communism was rampant. This fear was weaponized against various movements, including the burgeoning civil rights movement. Activists fighting for racial equality were often labeled as communists. This was a tactic to discredit them. It aimed to link their just cause with a feared foreign ideology. Martin Luther King Jr. himself faced such accusations from the FBI. The goal was to isolate these leaders. It was to make ordinary people afraid to associate with them or support their cause. During World War II, the internment of Japanese Americans stands as a chilling testament. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, fear and prejudice ran high. These emotions were expertly manipulated. Japanese Americans, many of them citizens, were portrayed as a fifth column. They were seen as an internal threat, despite no evidence of widespread disloyalty. This fear led to one of the most egregious violations of civil rights in American history. Over 120,000 people were forcibly removed from their homes. They were incarcerated in camps, their lives and communities shattered by fear-driven policy. The tactics of fear-mongering have not disappeared. They have merely adapted to new contexts. The post-9/11 era saw a surge in fear related to terrorism. This understandable fear was, at times, exploited. It led to policies that disproportionately affected Muslim and Arab communities. Increased surveillance became normalized. Profiling, though officially denied, became a lived reality for many. The narrative often painted an entire religion or ethnicity with a broad, suspicious brush. This impacted civil liberties. It created an atmosphere where dissent or questioning of security measures could be labeled as unpatriotic or dangerous. Immigration debates are another modern arena for fear-mongering. Immigrants are often depicted as a threat. They are blamed for economic problems. They are portrayed as carriers of crime or disease. They are cast as unwilling to assimilate. These narratives tap into deep-seated anxieties about cultural change and economic stability. Complex issues of global migration and economic policy are reduced to simple, fear-inducing slogans. This makes it harder to have rational discussions about immigration reform. It fuels xenophobia and makes it easier to justify harsh, inhumane policies at the border and within communities. The fight for LGBTQ+ rights also faces significant fear-based opposition. Opponents often stoke fears about the erosion of traditional values. They create moral panics around issues like gender identity or same-sex marriage. Children are frequently invoked, with claims that LGBTQ+ equality somehow endangers them. This is a classic fear tactic. Protect the children from a vaguely defined but supposedly insidious threat. Such rhetoric aims to halt progress. It seeks to deny equal rights and dignity by portraying a segment of the population as a danger to societal norms or the innocence of youth. Discussions around criminal justice reform are also heavily influenced by fear. The tough-on-crime rhetoric often relies on stoking public fear of rampant criminality. Any attempt to address mass incarceration or police brutality can be met with warnings of rising crime rates. This creates a political climate where substantive reform is difficult. The fear of being seen as soft on crime can silence politicians. It can also sway public opinion against measures that could lead to a more just and equitable system. The narrative of constant danger makes it harder to address the root causes of crime or the injustices within the system itself. Fear-mongering profoundly shapes public perception. It does not just create fear, it creates distorted realities. When a group is consistently portrayed as a threat, stereotypes become entrenched. Prejudice finds justification, not in fact, but in manufactured fear. This makes empathy difficult. It makes solidarity almost impossible. If you are taught to fear someone, you are unlikely to see their humanity. You are unlikely to recognize their struggle for rights as legitimate. Instead, their demands for justice can be misconstrued as aggression, as an attack on your own safety or way of life. This distorted public perception directly translates into policy. Laws are not made in a vacuum. They reflect and are influenced by the prevailing mood of the populace. If the public is fearful of a certain group, discriminatory laws become easier to pass. Increased policing and surveillance of targeted communities gain public acceptance. Funding for social programs that might address root causes of inequality can be cut. Instead, resources are poured into measures that appear to address the manufactured threat. This creates a cycle. Fear leads to bad policy, and bad policy often exacerbates the conditions that can breed genuine social problems, which are then used to fuel more fear. The consequences of this cycle are severe. Trust between communities erodes. Social cohesion frays. Genuine progress on civil rights is stifled, sometimes for generations. Individuals and entire communities suffer tangible harm. They face discrimination, violence, and the denial of basic human dignity. The promise of equality remains unfulfilled, not because it is an impossible dream, but because fear has been allowed to obstruct the path. The energy that should be spent building a more just society is instead diverted to fighting shadows and suspicions. The cost is measured in lost potential and continued suffering. Overcoming fear-mongering is therefore essential for any genuine progress in civil rights. This requires conscious effort. It demands critical thinking to dissect and reject manipulative narratives. It calls for empathy, the willingness to understand the experiences of others, especially those targeted by fear. It necessitates courage from leaders and ordinary citizens alike to speak out against fear tactics. Building coalitions across different groups, united by a common pursuit of justice, is vital. The fight for civil rights has always been a fight against fear. To move forward, we must continue to choose understanding over suspicion, hope over despair, and courage over fear. True progress demands nothing less.